Welcome back to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to truly understanding complex ideas. Today, we're diving headfirst into one of the most profound and, frankly, challenging works in philosophy, Immanuel Kant's Grounding for the Metaphysics of Morals. You've sent us the sources, and our mission is to cut through the density and pull out the essential insights that can genuinely reframe how you think about right, wrong, and why any of it matters.
Indeed. Can't believe we could build a moral system based entirely on pure reason, independent of our feelings, desires, or even the consequences of our actions.
Yeah.
It's a radical idea. Really focus on understanding the very foundation of duty and what makes an action truly moral.
Right. We're going to unpack why Kant argued that only a good will is unconditionally good. How he distinguished acting from duty versus merely in conformity with duty, that's a key one. And how he developed, well, a universal moral compass for all rational beings. This is where it really gets interesting. We'll explore the idea that the true source of morality isn't found in what makes us happy, but in a deeper, more unconditional principle. So what does this all mean for you, and how can these insights give you a fresh perspective on the ethical choices we all face every day? Let's dive in. Okay, let's start at the beginning. Kant kicks things off by talking about the ancient Greek way of dividing philosophy. Three main branches: physics, ethics, and logic. But he immediately refines this in a really crucial way.
What's fascinating here is Kant's insistence on separating material philosophy, which looks at specific objects and the rules they follow, like laws of nature in physics or laws governing human will in ethics, separating that from formal philosophy, which is pure logic. Logic, for Kant, is concerned only with the universal rules of thinking itself, regardless of what you're thinking about.
Right. And within that material philosophy, he draws a sharp line between physics, which describes basically how everything does happen in the natural world, and ethics, or moral philosophy, which deals with loss of freedom or how everything ought to happen. This immediately sets up a tension, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. This raises a critical question. Can moral laws be discovered through experience, like the laws of physics? Or do they have to come from somewhere purer? Kant's firm answer is that for a moral law to be universally binding, to have absolute necessity and create a genuine obligation, it must come purely from reason, from what he calls a priori principles.
A priori.
Think of a priori as knowledge that exists independently of any sensory experience. It's like knowing 2 + 2 = 4 without ever needing to count apples.
Okay. So for Kant, a moral rule like don't lie isn't just, a good suggestion because lying messes things up socially. He's saying it has to be valid for all rational beings everywhere without any exceptions because it's rooted in pure reason itself. That's a huge claim.
It is. And Kant argues that if morality relies on anything from human experience, whether it's what makes people happy or what their customs are or even human nature itself, then it can only ever be a practical rule, not a true moral law. He calls for a metaphysic of morals, which is like a moral system stripped bare of anything empirical, anything from experience. He says this is absolutely essential to investigate the true source of these pure principles and prevent morality from becoming corrupted. Mixing empirical and pure principles, he states quite strongly, simply spoils the purity of morals.
This leads us right to the heart of Kant's argument, and it's a truly radical starting point. He famously says nothing can possibly be conceived in the world or even out of it, which can be called good without qualification except a good will. It's like he's saying your smartest invention or your biggest fortune doesn't count if the intention, the will behind it, isn't pure.
Exactly. The big picture here is that all the things we usually think are unequivocally good things like intelligence, courage, wealth, even health and happiness itself, Kant says they're only good conditionally.
Conditionally. How so?
Meaning they're only good if they're used by a good will. A brilliant villain, for example, is more dangerous because of their intelligence, not less. Their cleverness, in that context, is anything but good.
So a good will isn't good because of what it manages to achieve or how useful it turns out to be.
No.
It's good simply by virtue of the volition, that is, it is good in itself. Even if, by some terrible twist of fate, it accomplishes nothing. Kant says it would still shine by its own light as a jewel. Its usefulness, or lack thereof, can't add or take away from its inherent value.
This raises an important question that Kant grapples with. Why would nature give us reason if instinct would be better for just achieving happiness? I mean, many philosophers before him thought happiness was the ultimate goal.
Sure, that seems intuitive.
But Kant observes that The more a cultivated reason applies itself with deliberate purpose to the enjoyment of life and happiness, so much the more does the man fail of true satisfaction.
Okay.
He even suggests this can lead to misology, which is basically a hatred of reason because people feel it's just led them astray from contentment.
That's a fascinating thought. So reason's true purpose isn't primarily to make us happy,
No,
but something far nobler.
exactly. For Kant, reason's true destination is to produce a will, not merely good as a means to something else, but good in itself. This good will, while not the only good thing in the world, must be the supreme good, the necessary condition for every other good, even the pursuit of happiness itself.
Okay, so with the goodwill established as the unconditional good, the next logical question Kant tackles is, how does that intention translate into action? And this is where his concept of duty becomes absolutely crucial. He clarifies that it's not enough for an action to simply conform to duty. It must be done from duty to have moral worth.
This is a really subtle but vital distinction. Take his example of a prudent shopkeeper.
The one who doesn't overcharge.
Right. On the surface, he's doing the right thing. But Kant argues that while he honestly served them, it's not enough to say he acted from duty. Why not? Because his own advantage required it. He wanted to keep customers, build a good reputation.
Ah, so self-interest.
The action was done from a selfish view.
So effectively, the moral universe isn't giving out gold stars just for being strategically nice.
Not for Kant, no.
It's like, yeah, you didn't overcharge, but only because you figured it was good for a business. Still good, maybe, practically speaking, but not morally good in his book, right? It feels like Kant is setting a very high bar here for moral worth.
He is, and that's an important point. It's not about the outcome or even the general goodness, but the motivation. Consider someone preserving their life. Most people do so from a natural inclination to live.
Sure.
While this action conforms to duty, it has no intrinsic worth, if done merely from desire. But imagine someone utterly despondent from adversity and hopeless sorrow, someone who wishes for death, yet preserves his life without loving it, not from inclination or fear, but from duty. Then his action, because of its underlying principle, its maxim, has moral worth.
Wow. And this applies to helping others too, right? If you're a naturally sympathetic person who just loves spreading joy.
Yeah, the cheerful philanthropist.
As amiable as that might be, Kant suggests it still lacks true moral worth if it stems only from that feeling rather than from duty.
Precisely. The moral worth only emerges if, for example, that same philanthropist is, say, clouded by sorrow of his own, extinguishing all sympathy.
Doesn't feel nothing, just numb.
But still tears himself out of this dead insensibility and performs the beneficent action simply from duty. That reveals an incomparably highest moral worth. He even says securing one's own happiness is indirectly a duty, but if you only pursue it because you want to be happy, from inclination.
It loses its moral value.
It loses its moral value. This is why Kant says practical love, beneficence for duty's sake, can be commanded. Even when one feels repelled by a natural and unconquerable aversion to the person they're helping, duty overrides feeling.
Okay, given everything we've talked about so far, the goodwill, acting from duty, how does Kant give us a practical tool for moral decision-making? Because that's precisely what leads us to his most famous idea, the categorical imperative. He presents 3 key propositions about moral worth. First, it doesn't come from the purpose or effect of an action,
Not the consequences.
but from the maxim, the subjective principle that guides your will.
Second, duty is the necessity of acting from respect for the law. Now, when Kant talks about respect for the law, he's not talking about being scared of punishment or just doing what you're told. It's different.
Okay.
It's a unique kind of reverence our reason generates for the moral law itself, like a deep internal recognition that this rule is universally right, and that your own personal desires or comfort, what he calls self-love, must bow to it. The object of this respect is the law only.
And here's where we get to the core of it. The third proposition, the categorical imperative itself. Kant boils it down to this ultimate test. I am never to act otherwise than so that I could also will that my maxim should become a universal law. Or, put another way, act as if the maxim of thy action were to become by thy will a universal law of nature.
This is a powerful, almost brutal test when you apply it. Take the example of making a false promise to get out of trouble.
Okay, the lying promise.
Kant challenges you. Should I be content that my personal rule, my maxim, should hold good as a universal law for myself as well as for others.
You quickly realize that if everyone lied whenever they were in difficulty,
The whole idea of promising breaks down.
exactly, the promise itself would become impossible. No one would trust promises, so the very concept would unravel. Such a maxim would necessarily destroy itself if universalized. It fails the test. It cannot be a moral action.
And he applies this to other scenarios too, showing how different actions would fare. Like suicide, a personal rule to shorten life out of self-love to escape pain.
Would contradict the very nature of self-love, which is fundamentally about self-preservation and improvement of life. If everyone did that, the purpose of self-love itself is destroyed.
It's a contradiction in conception.
Then, neglecting talents. While a world of idle people might technically exist,
Maybe.
a rational being cannot will to neglect their faculties. Why? Because reason itself wills the development of our abilities for all sorts of possible purposes in life. It's a contradiction in the will, he'd say.
A contradiction in willing, yes. Your will contradict itself.
And not helping others in distress. You might think, okay, a world where no one helps others could maybe subsist. People just fend for themselves.
You could concede it.
But you cannot will this maxim to be universal because many cases might occur in which one would have need of the love and sympathy of others. You'd be willing a world where you'd be denied help when you need it, which contradicts your own rational self-interest, your own future will.
What's truly remarkable is how Kant uses this single principle to derive genuine duties. Both the strict ones, like not lying or committing suicide,
The ones that involve a direct contradiction.
and the laxer or meritorious ones, like cultivating talents or helping others, where the contradiction is in the willing. We recognize the profound validity of this categorical imperative, Kant thinks, even if our inclinations sometimes tempt us to make exceptions for ourselves.
This distinction between types of commands is absolutely key to understanding what Kant means by a truly moral law. He defines an imperative as an objective principle that is obligatory for a will. It's basically a command of reason.
Right. And imperatives for Kant fall into two main types: hypothetical and categorical. Hypothetical imperatives are conditional. They represent the practical necessity of a possible action as means to something else that is willed. They're always like an if you want X, then you ought to do Y statement.
So, like an imperative of skill. If you want to be a great chef, you ought to learn knife skills.
Or even if you want to be a successful poisoner, Kant says you ought to learn chemistry.
Right, the end goal isn't judged morally there, just the means to achieve whatever goal you happen to have.
Precisely. Then there are counsels of prudence. These relate to happiness, which Kant says we can, with certainty, assume that they all actually have by a natural necessity. Basically, everyone wants to be happy.
Seems fair.
But because happiness is so indefinite and empirical, it's based on all sorts of arbitrary ends that vary wildly from person to person and moment to moment. These precepts are not strict commands, but counsels, advice. We can't know for certain what will make us truly happy, so reason can only offer advice, not commands, on how to pursue it.
So if I pursue happiness, that's a hypothetical imperative, or maybe just a counsel, not a moral law. It's not a command in the same way don't lie is.
Exactly. But the categorical imperative is fundamentally different. It's the moral one. It commands a certain conduct immediately, without having as its condition any other purpose to be attained by it.
No if clause.
No if clause. It's objectively necessary in itself. It concerns the form and mental disposition of the action, not its results. This, for Kant, is the imperative of morality. It's an unconditional command. It leaves the will no liberty to choose the opposite. Just do this, don't do that, full stop.
What's fascinating here is that Kant points out why, in his view, previous attempts to define morality failed. They typically viewed humans as subject to laws given by something else, whether it was God, society, nature, or even our own feelings. This always required some kind of interest to motivate us, either an attraction or a constraint, a carrot or a stick.
Right.
For Kant, this is heteronomy, meaning governed by others or by something external to your own reason.
The true principle of morality, the sole principle of morals, must be autonomy of the will.
Self-governance.
Exactly. This is the property of the will to be a law to itself, independent of any external objects or interests or inclinations. It means we are bound only to laws that are of our own giving laws that originate from our own rational nature, though at the same time they must be universal laws applicable to everyone.
So the moral law isn't imposed on us from the outside. It comes from our own rational nature when we think universally. And this leads to another incredibly powerful idea. The kingdom of ends. What's that about?
The kingdom of ends.
Hmm.
It's a beautiful concept and envisions the union of different rational beings in a system by common laws, a community of moral agents. The core idea underpinning this kingdom is that man, and generally any rational being, exists as an end in himself, not merely as a means to be arbitrarily used by this or that will.
An end in himself.
Which gives us the second very famous formulation of the categorical imperative. So act is to treat humanity, whether in thine own person or in that of any other, in every case as an end withal, never as means only.
Okay, so if you lie to someone, you're not just being dishonest in the abstract. You're treating them as a means to your end, to get out of trouble maybe, or to gain something,
You're using them.
rather than respecting them as an end in themselves, as a rational being with their own goals and worth. You're denying their inherent value.
Indeed. And this brings us to the distinction Kant makes between value and dignity. Things with value can be replaced by an equivalent. They have a market value if they satisfy general human inclinations or needs,
Like a loaf of bread,
or a fancy value if they satisfy a specific taste or preference.
like a piece of art maybe.
But that which constitutes the condition under which alone anything can be an end in itself, which is our rational nature, our capacity for morality, this has not merely a relative worth, but an intrinsic worth, that is, dignity.
And what specifically has this dignity?
Morality, and humanity is capable of it, is that which alone has dignity. Skill and diligence might have market value, wit and humor, fancy value. But things like fidelity to promises, benevolence from principle, not just inclination, these have intrinsic worth. Their worth lies not in their effects, but in the disposition of mind, the maxims of the will that drive them. Dignity comes from the rational being's privilege of participating in the giving of universal laws, making us a member of a possible kingdom of ends. It's our capacity to be self-legislating moral agents that gives us this unique status.
This all sounds incredibly compelling, but it also raises a really fundamental question. How is a categorical imperative even possible? How can pure reason possibly dictate what we ought to do without relying on experience or our feelings? It still feels a bit like magic, or maybe a bit circular, right? If morality depends on autonomy, and autonomy is acting morally.
Yeah, that's the crux of it, isn't it? This is where Kant ties it all back to the concept of freedom. He defines freedom not as being able to do whatever you want, but as this property of such causality, the will that it can be efficient, independently of foreign causes determining it, like our reason causing action, not just our desires.
Hey.
It's not lawless, though. A free will acts according to immutable laws, but of a peculiar kind, namely, the laws it gives itself through reason. So a free will is a will that is a law to itself, which is precisely autonomy. Therefore, for Kant, a free will and a will subject to moral laws are one and the same.
Okay, so to have a moral law, the categorical imperative, we must assume freedom. And if we assume freedom, autonomy, then a moral law follows. It does sound like a bit of a philosophical chicken and egg problem. How does he resolve that apparent circle?
He confronts this circle directly. He says we seem trapped, but he resolves it by introducing the idea of 2 points of view from which we can regard ourselves. First, we see ourselves as belonging to the world of sense, the physical world.
Where things happen according to cause and effect.
Right, where we are affected by objects governed by natural laws, instincts, and inclinations. In this world, our actions seem determined, heteronomy. Second, we also belong to the world of understanding as intelligence, as pure rational activity.
The intelligible world.
Here, we are independent of sensibility and capable of giving laws to ourselves through reason, autonomy.
Ah, so as rational beings, we can conceive of ourselves as free, self-legislating agents in that world of understanding, even though as physical beings, we are undeniably part of the world of sense and subject to its laws. It's like we have this dual citizenship.
Precisely. And the categorical imperative is possible because the idea of freedom makes me a member of an intelligible world. In that intelligible world, ideally, your actions would always conform to the autonomy of the will, to the moral law derived from reason. But because you also exist in the world of sense, with its inclinations and desires pulling you away,
They only ought to conform.
they ought to conform. And this categorical ought is the command that bridges the two worlds. It's reason telling your sensible self what your rational self knows is right. Kant even points out that the most consummate villain, when presented with examples of honest or dutiful action, wishes he possessed those qualities.
Even if you won't act on it.
Right. Kant takes this as proof that the villain, too, transfers himself in thought with a will free from the impulses of the sensibility into an order of things wholly different. He recognizes the authority of the moral law derived from his own reason, even if he fails to follow it.
So, while we can't ultimately explain how pure reason can be practical, how it can actually motivate action, or how freedom itself is truly possible in a mechanistic universe,
Yeah, Kant says that's beyond the extreme limits of all practical philosophy.
we must presuppose it. It's a necessary hypothesis, a postulate for morality to even make sense.
And this is the ultimate implication, really. Morality isn't just a useful social construct or a means to achieve a pleasant life. For Kant, it's rooted in the very structure of our rational being.
Yeah.
It demands unconditional obedience through respect for the universal law we give ourselves as autonomous beings. It's built into who we are, fundamentally.
So, you've just taken a deep dive into Kant's, well, truly groundbreaking work. We've seen how he meticulously builds this case for a morality rooted in pure reason, independent of our inclinations or desired outcomes, from the unconditional goodness of a good will, right at the start, to the universal test of the categorical imperative, and finally to that profound connection between freedom, autonomy, and human dignity.
Yeah, the core takeaway, I think, is that true moral worth comes not from what you do or even the result, but why you do it. It comes from acting on a maxim, a principle that you can genuinely will as a universal law for everyone. Doing it out of respect for that law itself and always seeing yourself and others as ends in themselves, never merely as means. It's about your internal compass aligning with universal reason.
And this isn't just abstract philosophy, is it? It offers a powerful lens, maybe a challenging one, through which to examine your own choices. Not just looking at the consequences, but digging into the underlying principles. It asks you to consider, is my action based on a rule I could truly want everyone to follow all the time? Am I treating others and myself with the respect due to rational beings, as ends, or just as tools?
Which leads to a final, maybe provocative thought for you to consider. If our inherent worth, our dignity, truly comes from this capacity we have to be self-legislating rational beings, members of that kingdom of ends, what implications does this have for how we view societal structures, our laws, our institutions, and what about the responsibilities we have not just to those near us, but to ourselves and maybe to all humanity? How might a world truly governed by the principle of treating everyone as an end in themselves actually operate? What would that look like?
A powerful thought indeed, something to mull over. We hope this deep dive has given you not just knowledge, but perhaps a new framework, a new way to engage with the moral landscape around you. Until next time, keep digging deeper.